Welcome to the Myofascial Health Podcast, hosted by me, Unu. Follow along as I explore the depths of John Barnes' myofascial release approach on my road to mastery. Along the way, I'll be sharing the lessons I learn as I open my myofascial release practice in Austin, Texas, so that you don't have to make the same mistakes I do. Welcome back to the Myofascial Health Podcast. Now, I am joined here by a very special guest. He has been a LMT since 2012, an MFR therapist since 2017, and he's even opened up his own myofascial therapy clinic in 2021. It's my honor to present Corey Cosgrove. Welcome to the show.
Well, thank you for having me. And again, it's my pleasure to be here, and I'm honored to have this opportunity to be interviewed by you.
Oh, no worries. You know, I try to do my part. I actually enjoy doing these, so hopefully there's no pressure. I think a lot of people tend to put a lot of pressure on themselves, but I'm just here to have a conversation with you because I know a little bit about your story, but I would love to learn more about that and share some of your insights with my audience. Now, can you tell us how you even got into MFR in the first place?
Oh, goodness. The truth of the matter is when I was managing an outpatient clinic north of here, a friend of mine was already involved with the MFR seminar. So once an opportunity came up when I was an outpatient that one was available, it was in 2017 in Louisville, Kentucky that MFR1 came about. And I asked the PT that I worked for at that time. She was an absolute sweetheart. She was in her 70s, and she was more involved with her golf game than her work. So she was constantly paying me overtime and all this stuff. But anyways, so I asked her, I said, hey, there's a seminar I'm really interested in. Would you mind if I went down and took this? And she looked at it and she says, well, heck, I took this back in the 80s. I'll even pay for it. So, she goes, well, I'm not paying for your lodging. So I went ahead and I booked a kind of a much nicer room than the room block. So I was up on like the one of the top floors, and it kind of overlooked the river in Louisville and the Yum Center or the KFC Yum Center. And it was during Halloween. So that Halloween weekend in 2017. And so I took that opportunity and I drove down. I packed up my little Honda Civic and I rolled down to Louisville, Kentucky, and I checked in and sit up on the top of the balcony overlooking the river, and it was just a surreal experience. And that class, it was just jam packed. I think we had about 135 or 140 students in there. And my first experience with the DVD course, and Valerie was the main instructor. And I'll never forget the psoas release that she gave me. So, and that's what kicked it off. And ever since, I've been trying to take between 3 and 5 seminars a year just to kind of keep it refreshed. And over the course of the 8 years or so that I've been doing this, it's really turned into my path, and I've truly dedicated my whole life to John's teachings and myofascial release.
I love that. I think when you had your boss say, hey, I've taken that course before, I'm more than supportive, I'll even pay for it, you just got to take care of lodging. That level of support is huge. I can't say that I got that same level of support, and hey, we have different paths. But when I hear your story, you took that very well, and then you had mentioned a psoas release. I think we can connect. I very much remember certain individuals based on the techniques that I traded with them. Now, can you tell us about the DVD course? Because for me, I tend to gravitate towards courses that John teaches, and I have yet to take the DVD course. Now, those people who have taken the DVD course, they say it's really great. You still learn a bunch of stuff. But for me, there's something about John being there in the room and teaching that makes me feel something a little bit differently. Can you explain what your experience was with the DVD course compared to maybe, say, a seminar you've taken with him where he's teaching in person?
Oh, goodness. So I'm gonna try to split my mind into 2 parts on this one. So a DVD course, there's a lot of information in the DVD courses, and they're typically held for a lot of like really structural MFR classes. So when you look at trying to learn 16 to however many different techniques in one class, it's a little bit difficult to get that theory that you're getting from John in person. So to have it on a DVD, I think it flows much better on those entry level courses, only because it keeps your mind active versus when you're, let's say you're in Quantum Leap with John, or even Advanced Unwinding or Rebounding. You do a technique and you're actually in his presence processing all that. And there's just some sort of it's like a frequency resonance that goes about the room that emanates from John during his seminars. And you can get a little bit of that from the DVD courses, but again, I like the DVD courses as well because you're so active. You have, and having the opportunity of assisting in these, you have specific time frames that that you have to stop the video, and then you have to get the therapist on the table and hands on, and you have to keep it going. Whereas the other courses you might learn, like MFR3, we learned probably 6 to 8 different techniques over the week, but they were so in depth and we had so much time involved with them that you just can't get that out of a DVD. So it's important to take both, I would say. Don't just hold off for having something live in person with John, and then don't just push off it because it's just a DVD. The point of the matter is not only are you still getting the techniques, you're still getting hands-on with skilled therapists that have been teaching this for years, but you're getting the love essence of the entire room plus 20 hours of continuing education towards your professional license. So, even if you just want to keep it channel 5, 20 hours of continuing ed for your license is 2 or 3 years worth of education. So, either way, it's going to be worth it, but definitely try to incorporate both aspects of the learning experience.
I think you shared really good insights. Just hearing that has nudged me into the direction of taking a DVD course when it's offered. I tend to
Yeah,
try to go to Sedona. I get to reset there, but I can definitely see how you had to split your mind into, and they're two different experiences, but they're both great. So you would encourage both of them, is what I'm hearing.
absolutely. Absolutely. And then same thing for the T for T and the Skills Enhancement Center. I took my T for T in February because I wanted to feel sort of that love essence. Some of that love essence that I was missing out as a child. I wanted to get that through T for T in Melbourne. So I was able to get that more compassionate, caring experience out of the Melbourne clinic. And then for the skills enhancement, I went over to Sedona a month later and just really dove into not only like basically the really hard, every 5 minutes you're with a new client, you're multiple hands on, and you're just constantly moving, and your energy is constantly uplifted into a really high resonating clinic. So, and then my next experience hopefully will be a T for T in Sedona, and then a skills enhancement in Melbourne. So I can get that opposite effect. So I can get the whole aspect of the sphere, so to speak.
I love how you process that as thinking of it as parts of a sphere.
Yeah,
I took my skill enhancement in Malvern when John was treating there, and then I did my T for T at Therapy on the Rocks. Now,
sure.
I just recently repeated my T for T at Therapy on the Rocks, and it helped me kind of work through some things and give me clarity on the subconscious level, because when I was in my head, I was just going back and forth and I couldn't really decide. But your true subconscious, what I would say your soul and your spirit, they're leading you. But sometimes you get in your own way. And something that John always teaches is get out of your own damn way.
Get
So
out of your own way. Yeah.
so when I was able to go there, I cleared out some stuff and I came back refreshed and had clarity and direction on where my path needed to go. Now, something that you had mentioned in your T for T is you were able to connect with your love essence that you didn't get as a child. What does that mean?
Yeah. So, I grew up just like everybody else in most cases. I had 6 siblings. So there were 6 of us all together. Everybody were half siblings, except for one full-blooded sister. Everybody was 4 years apart, except for my own sister that's full-blooded. And my dad was a Vietnam vet from the Marines, and so it was very difficult growing up. My mom, she worked at a second shift at Kmart, which is just a department store. If people don't know what Kmart is, but still second shift. And then during the day, she would occasionally cut hair. And my dad, he worked for the city of the town that we lived in. And I believe he was second or third shift, but he would have multiple episodes of PTSD snaps, and then we would be waking up in the middle of the night being abused, and so it was very difficult. And really the only love experience that I had was pretty much isolation and not being hit or not being touched. So I decided, to kind of, be in February, being Valentine's Day, and being about love essence and kind of coming out of that dark winter cavity that we all have to go into to reflect on our years past and try to not only come out of the cocoon but shake off that chrysalis for spring. So that's why I decided to go to Melbourne, because it's primarily all female therapists, and they just that was my first experience with internal work, and just I really really opened up to that experience of not only being touched by people, because I don't get treatments very often even myself, but to be touched by somebody that has the intention of, okay, for an hour we're going to focus on your healing or your topics or your emotions. So that was just something that allowed me to really step out of my comfort zone, more so than QL or more so than advanced unwinding, but to really spend a whole week. I mean, to spend 3 hours in one clinic every day for 5 days that's something special. So I wanted to be surrounded by just knowing that they had that loving essence of, oh, that primal role of motherhood, that primal essence of nurturing. That's kind of what I needed, or I felt like I needed at that time. And then the month later, I felt for my birthday, at the end of March, that Aries, that power, that flame. I got to be at Therapy on the Rocks. I got to be around Rob and his power, and John, his soul essence, and how Sean just ties everything up together, and how Maya is there, with her loving essence, and just everybody there. It just all tied in just perfectly.
I love that you shared that, and thank you so much for opening up a little bit about your past. I know sometimes it can be hard for people to talk about that, and it sounds like you've been able to work through things, and getting treated at whether it be Malvern or Therapy on the Rocks in Sedona has helped you kind of connect back to these kind of motherly things in Malvern you had mentioned, and then these other kind of what you described as like Aries power in
Yeah.
March. And I'm curious now, before we started this conversation, you had mentioned that, you were in the Air Force formerly. And now, was that inspired by your dad and him serving, or how did that come to be?
No, actually, so I turned 18 March 28th, and then classes were going to be over the month later, when I graduated high school. So my mom brought me to the kitchen table and she said, "Look, um, I didn't save money for you to go to college, and you're not staying here." And now I had good grades, and I had intentions, and I was really, really active in music, and like I was in the honors choir, and I played with a professional band my senior year of high school. I played with the brass band of Battle Creek, and I was a Louis Armstrong Jazz Award winner for jazz on drums, and then a John Philip Sousa Award winner for tuba. So when I sat down and I was given that option of, you could go to a factory or you could go to the military, I didn't. Nobody talked to me about college. I mean, I went to a primarily all black school. So I grew up very humbled right off the bat, and we didn't have those opportunities that a lot of my friends did. So my dad was a Marine. I had an uncle in the Navy, and I had another uncle in the Army. And I talked to my dad a little bit, and I can only tolerate so much time with him. And at that time, it wasn't very much even now. So he said, "Well, join the Air Force and the Navy because they have hot food and flushing toilets." And mind you, he was a Marine in Vietnam. So I just thought, oh gosh. So I went to the recruiter station and I talked to a variety of people. And no offense, but the Air Force recruiter, he was a little overweight. He had 5 o'clock shadow. His uniform was just kind of sloppy, and he was getting ready to retire anyways. But I thought, this guy looks like a normal guy, and it's like a normal job. So I looked at my lazy side, knowing that I was more, into music and expression, and I just said, this is what I'm going to do. But I went in knowing that I'm going to get out on the first opportunity I could. So I went into the Air Force. So I graduated, I turned 18 March 28th, graduated high school. Well, I finished classes at the end of April. Graduation was May 14th or 12th or something like that. And then I was in the Air Force July 17th of 1996. And then during the Clinton administration, there was a lot of cutting of budgets. So I had an opportunity to get out early in February of 98. So that's when I just got out. They said, okay, you're done. They gave me a list, and just like Forrest Gump, I mean, I had a week to get out. And I went from being on the flight line on working on F-15s in North Carolina to working in a factory a week later back here in Michigan. And
Wow.
yeah, it was a pretty fast transition. In a week, I was still wearing my steel toe boots from the flight line, but just driving a forklift instead, like making auto parts. Yeah.
That's interesting. So, one, I can totally understand your experience in Malvern, where you're saying, a lot of female therapists and getting that nurturing that you needed. And hearing your experience in the Air Force is interesting. That's not necessarily a path that I saw myself in. I do have a brother who's in the Navy. So when you say, the Navy or the Air Force, he had those same thoughts. Now, he's doing great now. He's an officer. He's served his time, I think, over 20 years. And I'm
Sure.
definitely proud to call him my brother, and I definitely thank him for his service. Now, and it whipped him into shape. I think you get the discipline that you can recognize. I think for you to be in the creative field or have an interest in music specifically, for you to go to a very regimented military step or chapter is kind of
Yeah,
like night and day. Can
yeah,
you
it was tough.
talk
I
to?
had a brother who was 4 years older, and he followed the Grateful Dead after he graduated high school. So
Wow.
he went from location to location. When Jerry Garcia passed away in 95, my brother came back home and he said, hey, you want to go to Cedar Point, which is this amusement park. And this was the summer before my senior year. So we're in the parking lot and he gives me this little strip of paper. And, being naive, I just thought it was candy or something. So he goes, put that under your tongue. So I said, sure. So I did. And he goes, well, have some orange juice. And we're in the parking lot in the morning at this huge amusement park. And then as we're walking into the gates, I'm like, what did you give me? My legs are getting all wobbly and I'm feeling kind of weird. And he goes, oh, I gave you 3 hits of acid. So I was just like, whoa. And now, mind you, I had a fantastic experience through the whole day. And I vowed to never do it again because I didn't want to be one of those stories. But, my mindset was already changed before I even was in my senior year of high school. So like it was like I broke through all that Channel 5 garbage and it really set me into Channel 3 before I even made the decision, okay, I got to do something. The Air Force is the safest opportunity and I can get out the quickest. So, I went in, I love my country and I served proudly, and I do believe that if I hadn't done it, my path would have been completely different. But I went in it knowing that I wasn't like everybody else, and I think that experience when I was I shouldn't even say this, but when I was 17, I think that experience really changed the course of my entire life. I mean, even I stumbled like everybody else, but I think I was a little bit more aware of my stumblings, so to speak.
And I think you stumble just because you think you're supposed to be on a certain path, and then you get guided towards the one you're supposed to be on. Now,
Exactly.
just to unpack a little bit, you had mentioned Channel 5 and Channel 3. And just as a reminder, because I
Sure.
don't know who listens to this podcast and what their experience is with myofascial release or seminars, but Channel 5 is your linear, logical, impulsive, and where fear tends to be. And a lot of people, especially as adults, will start to make decisions based on, what they see in the news or what makes the most sense. And channel 3 is more of your creative, your loving, your intuitive side. And that is where we all feel like you're being guided to. I think channel 5 is all the things that you've learned or in your experiences. And then channel 3 is more of your intuition. So when you talk about stumbling, it's more like your intuition was leading you down this path that, yes, probably changed the complete trajectory of your life in the best ways.
Absolutely. Yes.
Okay, and then this part of the conversation might take an interesting turn. And so I just want to preface this with we're about to talk about maybe a little bit of the medicine. And by that, I mean, whether that be the acid trip that you talked about, or maybe some other things that we're about to discuss. And I just want to make the disclaimer that this is not myofascial release. Okay, I'm gonna repeat that. This
No,
is
no.
not myofascial release. That being said, it's not uncommon for me to come across people who have explored these avenues. And I had met you in Quantum Leap that was hosted in Wilmington, Delaware. And I do remember the technique that we had traded with. It was rebounding that was mixed with some echoing, and I was on your suboccipital muscles. So that's how I remember you. And I remember during the seminar, or I was talking to someone and I had a question about plant medicines because I had taken ayahuasca once.
Sure.
And they had said, I'm not well versed in this area, but if there's someone who has more experience with this, it's Corey. So if you have a conversation about that, Corey would be your guy to talk about. Now, it sounds like you tried acid early on in your life in high school, you had said.
Yeah.
What is your experience with whether that be plant medicines or drugs in a sense?
So the way now this is my own personal experience and my own personal viewpoints, and I don't speak for anybody else. I don't condone the use of for any purposes other than pure healing, introspective healing. I'm not on board with people that like to take this stuff for parties and just to have fun with it. I journal beforehand to set my intentions. I try to journal while I'm under the influence of the plant medicine, and then I journal afterwards for a comparison. And so I don't really see LSD and anything that's lab created. I don't really see that as plant medicine. Um, you know, I've read Aldous Huxley's book, Doors to Perception, which is basically a huge explanation of ketamine. And again, I don't find that to be kind of plant medicine or plant medicine based either. Plant medicine to me is something that's going to really light you up on the inside and allow you to kind of go through doorways that were open, but it was just dark. So I started to I started this path of alternative methods of healing back like teenage years, 13, 14, but not taking any substances. This was just more meditative practices, spending a lot of time in nature, reading a lot of different books and things like that. So the experience of my LSD experience, was fun, but I was tricked. There's a big difference there. And now in 2012, I decided to do a lot of studying on psilocybin. So I somehow I got a hold of a book called Food of the Gods, okay, by Terence McKenna. And Dennis McKenna, his brother, is still alive and available, who's an ethnobotanist. So kind of like the movie Medicine Man, he tries to find different plant properties that have a medicinal property to help other cultures and our medicine itself. Terence McKenna was kind of trying to figure out how the receding of the Great Plains produced basically the domestication of cattle, which produced obviously a lot more mushrooms growing in fields naturally. So the early primates or the early hominids, the hunter gatherers, they would obviously forage and try to pick things. And one day, Greg or George or maybe Martha, stumbled on a mushroom and they were allowed to raise their internal vibration by this substance that allowed them to not only see sound and really solidified structures around them, but actually piece them all together. So it took it to a much further level of figuring out where I come from. Now, the backdrop story to that is because we're all half siblings. My dad was abandoned by his father at birth. His mother passed away at 4 years old. So him and all of his siblings were raised by basically orphan parents or adoptees, I should say. My mom, her father passed away when she was younger at an age. and raised by a stepfather, and her mother was very abusive, so she didn't really connect to that side of the family. So I have no idea where I even belong, where my lineage is at, or anything. So psilocybin allows you to, again, it allows you to kind of vibrate from within. I believe it's the pineal gland. And it kind of takes everything that's jumbled up and it aligns it just right to where you can get those repressed memories and urges just basically right up in front of you, and they explode out into a fractalized pattern. And then you can literally just kind of walk around each memory and you can sort them out, and you can say, this is why it was painful, and this is why they abused me, and this is why I did this when I was that age, and oh my gosh, why did I do that? And then Gaia, the essence of the earth, just kind of lifts you up and says, it's okay, you can be done with it. And then sometimes you feel like your emotions are just being squeezed out like a sponge, and all the negativity is just being pushed out of you. So that's more of the healing aspect of it. And then you have the connection as far as different messages, and that you might feel like you're being spoken to through an internal intuitive voice, or angels, or whatever it may be, whatever you believe. And they just kind of, psilocybin for me, it shows you the path that you're on, and what it could potentially be. And then it shows you a different path, your loving intuitive path, and says, this is what you need to be. And
Mm.
I've been in those situations where my ego gets in charge and says, no, you have to understand, I can't do that. I have to be there. And then that's where they, is what I call them, or them. It could be angels or whatever it is, but they say, okay, well, we will be there when you need help, but you're going to have to go through this, which alludes to the book called The Way of the Shaman, which I believe was written in the 70s, 74 or something like that. Yeah, I think 1945, and then republished in 78 and then 79. But it's about a gentleman who was out in the Amazon on ayahuasca, and he had an experience where he was visited by spirits, and it said, why should any God show you mercy if you haven't truly suffered before them first?
Mm.
So that's where that squeezing of the ego, or squeezing all that darkness out of you, and you're able to see that I would say the holy path, so to speak. The Celestine prophecies talks about it being the luminescent path, where you're able to raise your vibration to the point of the 10th prophecy, where you're able to just simply disappear. I don't believe in all totally that essence, but anyways, it alludes to that. So there was The Food of the Gods, which is a fantastic read, and psilocybin has done wonders as far as my healing experiences from the abuse. And I've utilized dosages of what's considered a microdose of 0.15 for a series of 30 days. And I've done 4 days on, 3 days off with 0.25. And my biggest dosage was 8 grams. And that was practically earth shattering. And then after a while of really studying even more, I started reading into DMT, or dimethyltryptamine, which is a natural molecule that we actually produce in our lungs, and our liver breaks it down, and our pineal gland stores it, and it secretes while we sleep. So it's what provides our dreams, or really our path to an intuitive voice. The book DMT, the Spirit Molecule, also on Blu-ray, or not Blu-ray, also on YouTube and all that stuff. It's an actual FDA study of DMT that Dr. Rick Strausman of the University of New Mexico had conducted. Now, he pulled the study on his own, not because of anything was going array, but everybody that took this substance, everybody had the same exact experience. And I myself have experienced this as well. Your body is flooded with DMT the first and last 7 minutes of your life. So when your body's flooded with this, it's really kind of known as the spirit molecule. It's what connects you to source. When I'm under the substance of it, and I've done it 46 times now, and most people only do it once or twice in their lifetime. I've done it 46 times in like 3 years, and and I've documented every one. But it's almost as if you can see a luminescent tunnel above you, and I call it the end of the spiritual realm, where the angels gild their swords to source. And it's like a chartreuse and blues and greens and just a beautiful resonance of color that is sound. And you're able to raise your own vibration to where you truly become frequency itself. And you can bring them closer or further away. And it's almost as if you're separating all of your molecules from your body. And all the elements are separating from the molecules. And all the elements are starting to break apart into the quarks. And you're starting to recycle into the earth, into the cosmos. And then you experience moksha. You experience the void. And your ego is completely crushed. And you're like, this is it. I've died. And within a second later, you're boom, right back in and you're breathing. And you're like, oh my God, I'm alive. I have a body. I have a soul. I just simply am, and everything reconnects, and you just have not a love for life by any means, because everything is still there and all that, but you have such a greater love and appreciation for the expression of life. You truly understand what life is meant to be. It's not clothes, it's not the solidified structure of the bounding matrix that we see as houses and cars and massage tables and computers that we're speaking through. It's it's the emotion. It's the tears, the pain, the love, the anguish, the cheer, the joy, the sorrow. It's everything combined into one that has to be separated so much for us to understand it at once, which is no wonder why medicine itself has separated the human body so much, because it's so much to comprehend at one time. So that's what DMT does. It allows you to comprehend everything at once, to be in the center of the sphere while the sphere around you is oscillating as if you are just simply sitting and the world is traveling around you.
That was so beautifully stated. Thank you so much for sharing that. Now, for the listeners who maybe are unfamiliar with this realm, psilocybin is the chemical in magic mushrooms. And so that's what Corey is talking about. And whether he's doing a micro dose or a macro dose or I think a hero's dose is considered 5 grams. So you did 8, is that correct?
8, yeah, 8 on multiple occasions.
Yes, and you're able to process some of your past traumas and kind of decipher that, I think that it can be used in a therapeutic sense. I think in Canada, they have explored this more deeply. But something that needs to be stated is you really need to respect the plant medicine. Just kind of like what you said,
Yes.
this is not a party drug. It's like, oh, we're going to try this and do this. You will have a bad trip because it will teach you the lesson that you need to respect the medicine. I myself have dabbled here, whether it be psilocybin with magic mushrooms, and I've had one experience with ayahuasca. And then, like you, I tend to stay away from the man-made drugs. Now, you experienced ego death, right? Where
Yeah.
you saw your life and you were able to see what the meaning or what life is supposed to be for you. And I love the way that you stated that in terms of it's about the emotions that you feel, the joy, the sadness, happiness. And that is what makes life. It's not about these, what I would call material things like, oh, look at the house that I live in, or the car that I drive, or the computer that I have, or this, that, and the other that we tend to measure ourselves about. And I think myofascial release helps guide us in that direction. I know that my experience with myofascial release has been that opportunity to explore my emotions and have what I would say the joy that I tend to try and follow, because it's easy for me to get caught up in the channel 5 of, oh, I have to do this today or these things have to get done. But where I am in my journey is instead of having just a to-do list, I've now started to write a to-feel list. And so, for example, if I'm saying something like, you know what, I want to feel joy today, then I prioritize that. And I set something up in my day of, oh, maybe I'll go play pickleball or I'll go rock climbing or do something that gives me joy. And then it will balance my life instead of just this never ending to-do list that tends to happen when you run a business to now hey, let's live life a little bit. That's what's important. And that's what you kind of discovered and rediscovered, whether it be through your ego death or through myofascial release. Now, I will also say that when I've been on psilocybin, it almost organizes the mess or the chaos, and you see things a little bit differently. And for me, I can't say that I've used it to process, some underlying traumas that I haven't engaged with. For me, I use it as a way to connect with nature. I think when I'm in nature and using psilocybin or on it, that it helps me kind of see things or connect with things that I just pass by, like flowers or trees or the sun or things like that. And it really gets you to kind of see the beauty in nature, that there's like a universal pattern that we're actually a part of. I think, like you
Yeah,
said, whether that's medicine or something else, John has said that we kind of live in this this paradigm where we break things down into smaller pieces, and that's separation, right? And we believe that if we understand things at the smallest level, that we will understand the things at the biggest level. And that's not necessarily true, because when we separate it, it's separate. Whereas when you are in this space, you're like, we're actually all connected, like we're having this conversation. We're in two different states, and there's a connection here through this myofascial web, so to speak. Now, I'll just share my ayahuasca experience. I've only done it once,
okay.
and it's a little bit of a long story. So I had come back from Sedona, and I had been recommended to see this artist, this local artist. His name is Parangi. And he's a good musician. I still listen to his music today, but it's kind of tribal. And I went to his show, and they did this ecstatic dance, which I was so unfamiliar with. And I was like, I can't believe that this is a life so different than mine that totally exists in, a couple of states over. And I had gone back to Austin where I live, and I had seen that Parangi was going to perform at this South by Southwest show, which is a music and kind of cultural. It's got music, it's got movies, it's got all sorts of technology, all these different aspects. But I went to his show, and there was a silent auction, and one of the auction items was for a shamanic healing session. Now, I wasn't someone who really explored or even caught on to this, but I had a friend who's also a myofascial release therapist, Carly Brand. Shout out Carly Brand. And she kept saying, Unu, you're a shaman. You're a shaman. I'm like, I don't think I am, because like I've never even delved in it. But he's like, that's what a shaman would say. I'm like, that's not me. But anyways, I see this auction item. I'm like, ooh, a shamanic healing session. Let me see what this is about. So I end up winning it. And I go meet up with the shaman. It's in his house. And I get this shamanic healing session. He like blows tobacco smoke through my hair. He puts this liquid, and then he spits it on me. I'm like, oh my God, this dude just spitting all, like I wasn't about it, right? And so he was giving me his kind of synopsis of what he read on my body. He's like, to be honest, it seems like you're pretty clean. It doesn't seem like you're struggling through things. And I'm like, yeah, for the most part, I'm pretty happy-go-lucky. And so, yeah, that didn't surprise me to hear that. And then he said, you know, this is part of what I do, and this is how you have met me. But where my true gifts lie are with plant medicines. And I said, what do you mean? And he said, well, I actually host ayahuasca ceremonies. And I was like, isn't that the one where you throw up and you poop your pants?
Yeah, yeah.
And he
I've
was
never
like,
done it. That's the only thing keeping me.
yeah, exactly.
The
So
purge, the purge.
the purge, exactly.
Yeah.
And he said, imagine like you are in Europe, and Christopher Columbus went to America and he came back, right? And you'd be like, hey, what was your experience like? And you might say, hey, there's Native Americans or quote unquote Indians, and they're savages and this, that, and the other, or whatever. But you wouldn't ever know that experience unless you went on it. And so sometimes people will think that they're savages, but I'm sure other ones had met totally fine and respectful and very nice ones. And so you don't know the journey unless you actually go on it. And so
Exactly.
I had said, like, I'm a little bit hesitant, but let me get back to you. So I obviously did some research. And I was like, dude, this is the one where you throw up and you poop yourself. Like, this does not sound like a good time. But I was curious about it, and I guess this is one of those intuitive moments that I got led to go on this path. So
Sure.
I ended up signing up for a 2-night ceremony, and it's out in the, I'm not going to say where it's at, but it was on this ranch, and it was this, and he had written an email saying like, pack light, there's going to be a lot of people there. So, you don't want to take up too much space. So I was
Sure.
thinking it was gonna be out in the boonies, like camping in tents and like just very low key. So I go out to this property and it's on this ranch, and it's actually this huge room, almost like a yoga studio. And in the middle, there's like the ceremonial, like statues and offerings. But it's this big wood floor, hardwood floor. And I had showed up first, and the only thing that I had packed was a sleeping bag because I thought you were supposed to pack light.
Sure.
As everybody else is coming in, I see they got these trifold tie mats plus these. I'm like, what is going on? I definitely made a mistake in not packing and preparing. So, anyways,
From glamping for the spiritual realm.
you got it. Glamping from the spiritual world. And we had started, we wait till the night when the sun sets, after the sun sets, to do the ceremony. And I remember them saying, we had a strict diet for 2 weeks. We couldn't eat, meats. I was no salt. That the hardest thing for me was no salt because I'm like, salt is in everything. I couldn't believe it. But I made it through, and that's supposed to help you kind of cleanse your body and
Yep.
to prepare for the plant medicines, grandmother ayahuasca, as she is referred to, so that you show that you're there to learn and you're respecting her and the process. And they had said, you really want to set an intention. And at this point in my life, I didn't know what that meant. I know that you like had intentions for certain things, but to set an intention for something that hadn't happened yet was brand new to me. So I didn't know what to say. But my intention for the first night was, I have some mild eczema. So I was like, hey, grandmother ayahuasca, could you help me out with that? And so it was funny for me to just like ask for that because like I was like, yeah, can I get help with this mild eczema versus like the person to my left is struggling for 8 years with depression. The
Sure.
person to my right is like 10 years struggling with PTSD. And here
And
I
you're
am,
like,
just,
just
hey,
a
I
little bit on
got
my elbow.
yeah, yeah, can you help with that? So it was a funny experience. And we had taken it and it was 3 rounds of shots. And they said, we have more than enough for everyone, but you have your free will to choose to take it or not. That's totally up to you. And something that I had come across was a video of Aubrey Marcus, who runs a podcast here in Austin. And he had taken ayahuasca multiple times and he said, take the medicine, like you're not going to want to, but take as much of the
Yeah.
medicine as you can.
Yeah.
And so all I knew for that first night is like, take as much of it as I can. And then you throw up. Now, here's the thing, like, if you or the purge right now, if you've never done it in this container, the only things that you reference throwing up with are very negative things like food poisoning or alcohol poisoning, things like that, where you're like, ugh, this is gross, right?
Yeah.
Whereas when you purge from ayahuasca, it's you getting rid of all this negative energy
Oh,
out of your body. So even though you're throwing up, it feels amazing to get this stuff out.
yeah.
And for me, I was purging and I don't really remember seeing too much. I remember seeing like flowy rainbows, but it wasn't anything super significant. Okay.
Sure.
And so that was my experience for the first night. Now I am on this hard wooden floor, hating life, and just like, oh my gosh, I signed up for a second night. How am I gonna get through this? And there was a gentleman who was maybe a couple of spots away from me, and he only signed up for one night. And he said he came over to me in the morning and he said, I noticed that you only had a sleeping bag, and I know you're here for a second night. I'm leaving today, but I have this sleeping pad. If I offered it to you, would you take it? And I said, I would love that sleeping pad. And so he gave it to me. And in that moment, I had this self-reflection of like, I don't know if the roles were reversed, that I would have done the same thing. And so
Right.
my intention for the second night was asking her, can you show me how to be a more compassionate human being? And so, you explore the land for the day and you're just waiting for the night to come so that you do the ceremony again. And I remember now having an intention. And then, yes, I'm journaling through this process, collecting my thoughts, working through things that I was struggling with at the time. And I had this intention now that you pray into this little shot of ayahuasca to have the medicine kind of breathe out your intentions.
Sure.
And so you take the shot and, everyone's just kind of waiting for the moment for the medicine to kick in. And you have these thoughts that kind of flow around, and it's not until they all align in this one moment, and then it shot me through to a experience that I had relived, and I didn't think anything of it. And it was a moment where my mom was supposed to pick me up from the airport, and I thought this was going to be like a mother-son bonding moment. And she decides to try to bail on me to go play cards. And I felt very hurt by that because I was like, man, I'm your son and you're going to go off and play cards. And I thought this was supposed to be a moment for us. And it's totally not. And I was like totally hurt by it. And so she ends up picking me up from the airport, and I'm trying to talk about this and I lose it, and I ended up losing my temper and raising my voice and kind of screaming at her. And so as I'm on this ayahuasca medicine, I am reliving this moment, but I am her, feeling what it feels like for how it feels like when I'm yelling and screaming at her. And it was such a terrible feeling. And I remember praying and thinking like, I remember thinking, if me purging will undo this crinkle that I've put into the universe, then I will gladly purge all night. And I was praying for
Sure.
forgiveness and praying that, that my mom is, feels loved and respected and all these things. But I remember just thinking like, if I can undo this, I will gladly purge the whole night. And so, anyways, I'm purging and purging, and they offered the second and third rounds. And I remember thinking, the first night I just took all the medicine I could because that's what I was told. But
Yeah.
for this particular experience, I was like, I don't want to lose this so easily. So I just sat there and felt this feeling throughout the whole night. So I didn't take the second and the third rounds. And then I remember in the morning just being like, man, I can't believe I made someone I love feel that way, especially someone as important to me as my mom.
Sure.
And so I would just remember, unpacking that and feeling like, man, I definitely need to be more conscious around that because I don't want anyone to feel that. Right. And
And
I
the true
remember,
purpose of life, to
yes,
feel the emotional expression of life itself.
absolutely. And that's part of that. And so I remember feeling lighter throughout, I think for the whole week. And that was
Yeah.
a very special moment for me. And so that's the only experience that I've had with ayahuasca. I've tried it once and I had that profound experience. But I think the important thing with when you are using plant medicines to heal or work through things, that the plant medicine allows you to get your step through the doorway. But where
Yeah.
the work really lies is integrating that in your everyday life. I think what
And it's not easy. I mean, to go through that process, it's not easy. I mean, I I learned that the Grateful Dead took LSD every weekend for a year. So I thought, well, I could try DMT every weekend for a year. Huh. And so I called it going to church. So every Sunday I set out my intentions of the blanket on the lawn, and and I truly blasted off, and it was not enjoyable by any means, but the lessons that came from it, the emotions, to be able to sit in a room and to pick out every emotion in there individually and to know what they're going through made me a more compassionate person. It made me a better, and again, this is that fine line, but it to me made me a better therapist because not only can I feel with my hands, but I can feel with my soul now, as opposed to where my soul was encased of this protective barrier that was placed on me growing up in my upbringing.
That's beautifully stated. Now, for me, I've tried DMT once, but it wasn't the same. I didn't take a large dose. It was just an experience that I had shared with a group
Sure.
of friends. Um, but
Yeah.
But for me, I prefer the plant medicines because for me, I feel like it's the trade-off. It's like you purge these things for the trade-off of
Sure.
learning the lessons. And I feel
Yeah.
like with man-made drugs, you miss that. So it's like, oh, you just want the good stuff without the bad stuff. And
Right.
whereas when you purge, it's like it's a very spiritual thing. You're getting these things out, and I'm praying, and it's like it's the trade-off that I think is necessary, but
Sure.
also, I'm not really a shaman. I don't really concoct all these things. But I think, like if it's natural and it comes from the earth, I would much more trust that than something that was made in a lab.
Yeah. The only time I've ever purged was so currently when I take psilocybin or mushrooms, I'll and this, my big isolation trips in the wilderness. I post quite a bit of them. Usually twice a year, I'll go out into the wilderness in the Upper Peninsula of Michigan, like completely out of nowhere. I find sites that there's nobody around, and then I'll spend usually 5 days fasting and just water only at my campsite, just kind of, for the purpose of fasting. And on the sixth day, what I eat is usually 6 grams of mushrooms, and which is a powerful experience. And there's everybody usually has about 4 minutes where they think they poison themselves, but and then once you get through that fear base, that's the only times I've ever purged. So now I reserve psilocybin for just the 1 or 2 times per the year. Because not only are you invested in time, like you're looking at an hour and a half of an experience for every gram that you take over probably 3 grams. And if you're pushing 6 grams, you're done for at least 9 hours. So you're invested in time. You've got all that that you're going to go through emotions and healing. And then that's pretty much, and then you're going to go through that vomiting aspect or the purge aspect, whereas DMT, it's like 3 to 4 good hits and you blast off, and you're 7 to 12 minutes of an experience, 3 minutes of crying and processing, 5 minutes of, okay, I'm back here and time to go do the dishes after 10 minutes. So, and if you do that wisely enough, you can kind of get there. And from what I understand, I haven't taken it yet, but what I understand, ayahuasca is the same molecule as DMT, but you're just there for a longer period of time.
Yes.
Yeah.
Now, let's say someone was curious about this, but had fears around plant medicines or DMT or those psychedelics. What
You
would you?
should be afraid.
Yes, that would be where you would be respecting the medicine. Now, what
Yes.
would you recommend for them to do if they were curious about it?
So if you're curious about it, I would, this is where my own personal viewpoints come in, where I get into like spiritualism. So on one hand, I look at, psychedelics as being the fruit of the tree of knowledge, the original divine sin. That gives you so much knowledge that, the rest of your life, it's or waking up from the matrix. The rest of your life, you're walking around knowing things that nobody else will unless they do the exact same thing. So there's that scary aspect of knowing that, you're going to have an ability beyond what most people will. And then if you openly talk about it, you're going to have people say, well, I think you can get there without it. And you'll have people judging you. And my only thing to say to that is if you think you can get there without it, take the 15 minutes and try. It's just that simple. How do you know where you're going if you don't have a destination in mind? That's, I think, where the plant medicine is not only, I think the plant medicine itself is the intention. And you speaking your intention to it is the divine connection between yourself and the path that plant medicine is going to take you. So just know that you're going to be given just an abundance of information, not only about yourself, about the well-being of everything. And your life will be different, but for a better way. And then take your time and really research, make sure that you're doing it for the right purposes. If you don't think it's right, don't do it. That's your intuitive voice saying it's not for you. Don't be peer pressured by friends or anything or family. Listen to your own heart. It will tell you. And if something comes to you in a natural way without being a party or without being, persuasive at a festival or anything like that, if it naturally comes to you, then it's the right way.
I love those recommendations, and I think that's spot on. If there's anything that I could add to that, it would be one, you definitely want to respect the medicine. Again, just to repeat,
Yes.
we're not partying, oh hey, have a good time, right? Like
No.
it's a very intense thing, and if you're not going into it thinking that, then you're gonna have a bad
Yeah.
time.
Use a scale. Make
Yes.
sure you have a scale.
Yeah.
I've done is at one time 150 milligrams of DMT. And most people do, yeah, most people do 50 to 75 milligrams because I just, I had a little baggie and I didn't have a scale and I had two of the same and it ended up being 150. And then, and mushrooms can be the same way because you might eyeball it and say, oh, that's just 3 grams or whatever. And you could really be taking some hefty 4 grammers.
Fair.
So just get a scale, be mindful of what you're doing.
And then also make sure you're in a safe space. I think
Yes.
making sure that you're in a container where safety is definitely honored adds to the experience. I think I've heard of people, not myself, because I only tried those things once, but when they were in a space where they didn't feel safe, that added to the trip. So making sure you
Yeah.
trust the people that you're around or the people that you're doing it with, and making sure that, hey, if someone is facilitating it, that they're doing it for the right reasons and not to get don't try to do it just because like, oh, you think it's the cool thing or somebody else is doing it. It very much needs to be personal to you. I love that the way that you had stated that, as if it's something that comes to you naturally and you feel called to do it, then do it. But if you
Yeah.
feel, hey, it's not for you and you're at a festival or at a party, like that's not the spiritual aspect that honors the medicine.
Right. And also to be mindful about, when you have other substances in your body, alcohol, marijuana, other things alter the effect. You will have a negative experience if you have alcohol in your system or a heavy meaty diet, or all these or a whole bunch of sugar and just crap throughout the day. And then you try to, well, I'm going to take mushrooms and see what happens. Well, don't, because
Yeah.
you won't like what happens.
Exactly. And I loved your experience that you take the time to go by yourself through the forest and hike. I do see you post
Yeah.
about that. And that's something that I'm drawn to. Just like I said, I think when I'm in nature, I can kind of relax. I'm not in a rush as I normally am when I'm in front of a computer. But is this a yearly thing for you, or is it just how often do you do it?
So it's biannually. I usually go in the spring. This year I missed out, but I typically go in the spring and I go in the end of the summer. And then if I do go out west, which I've gone out west without taking seminars, but I'll do the same thing. I'll fast out in the desert, just in a random location, and then that's when I typically will take DMT and really, and I don't mean this with any ego or boasting on my back, but I really channel the spirits and I really listen to what nature has to say. Yeah.
I love that. How did you start that? If it's been a kind of a biannual thing, how did that even come to be?
So the mushrooms was basically, after college you can't smoke weed because you need a job. So and I was always curious, and so that just happened. And when you're able to come into contact with mushrooms, it's a lot easier than what most people think. And then it was about 3 years ago on my birthday of all times, a friend of mine had DMT and she handed me the little baggie. And, I waited on it a few days until my birthday. And then she came over to sit with me while I did it. And, it was about 75 milligrams. And it was really, honestly, I think it was kind of fatty. It was kind of like a yellowish color. But I watched a lot of videos, read a lot of books for a good 3 years before I even knew what I was, going to do. So when I had the opportunity, I took the 3 hits. That first hit, you're like, nothing's happening, but your palms start getting sweaty and you're just like, okay, something's going on. You take that second hit and it's almost like you're at the peak of a mushroom trip. And things start to fractalize or look like a kaleidoscope, and you can start to hear like a almost like a crackling or a winding noise. And then it's like you swallow and you're hearing everything on the inside. And then you take that third big hit off the vape pen, and then all of a sudden you just sink back. And for me now, like I wouldn't say hyperventilate. I get into the Wim Hof breathing method at the same time. So, and that's to take me even further and faster. And so basically, I laid back on the couch and I just, there's this ivy, like this, some sort of a deity or an entity. It was made out of stone and ivy, and it had like this big, huge wheel. And I just consider it the wheel of time. And it had like etching type markers on it. And every time it cranked the wheel, or I would say every time she cranked the wheel, I went from my current life and my dad's current time backwards. So I experienced like all of his shortcomings, all of his factory layoffs, working at the city, his Vietnam experience, his abandonment experiences, his childhood birthing, and it just kept going and going and going and going until finally I just went into this blackness. And then there was like this weird praying mantis looking thing, and I said, I thought you were supposed to show me the beginning. And without saying anything, it just went, mm-hmm. And then I just immediately came back, and I was just kind of like, and I was like, what the hell was that? Because I was in my living room. I knew I was there, but I wasn't there. I was in my living room, but the living room no longer existed because all the realms of reality had finally separated and shifted out so you could see each space between the compounded layers of reality. And so anyways, I cried for a couple of minutes and then I came back and I looked at my friend and I said, I got to do it again real quick. She goes, are you sure? I said, yeah, they're supposed to show me the beginning. So she packed it up again and I just immediately just went after it. And that's when I just looked at her and I was breathing. I said, it's too much. And I just fell back. And that's when I felt everything separate. And I just thought, this is what death is. It was pure nothing but everything. There was no emotion, no sound, no love, no hate. It just was. And then I coughed and opened my eyes at the same time, and I could see sound just stop. And then I saw these etheric threads connecting me to everything around that was living with my cats and my friend. And I looked up, and there was this like a luminescent dome that was over me. And there was these three beings, and they just kind of looked at me, and I looked at them, and I was like, and I looked at my friend and I said, I can see them. And she goes, are you back? And I said, no. And my hands were connected to them through frequencies. And then slowly I started to come back. And then all I could do was hold my hands in the prayer pose and just be so thankful. And I was just filled with this, like a bliss and a loving, it was just ecstasy of pure cosmetic love that I felt that I feel you can only feel that when you die. And that's what I experienced. And from there forward, I thought there's so much more to this. I need to find out what there is to this. And then that's pretty much what I have been doing on the side ever since.
That is amazing. I
Yeah.
don't feel called to try it at this moment, but who knows? That might be a
Sure.
future. And I'm sure this conversation has helped nudge me in a way that kind of opens my eyes to the different realities that are very present. Now, thank you so much for sharing your insights and your journey. How do people find you?
So people can find me on, now this is for the therapeutic stuff, not for the plant medicine or anything like
Yes,
that.
yes.
Plant medicine
Myofascial release.
conversation is plant medicine conversation is over with now. So
Yes.
myofascial release. So people can find me on Massage Book. It's the simplest way. My business name is called the Healing Toadstool. Um, I explain that nonstop to the older folks around locally, like, how did you come up with a name? But, it's really just a name that I really enjoyed. So I locked it in a long time ago. So you can you can Google the Healing Toadstool and you'll be able to find me. But lately I've been treating animals a little bit more. So I've recently treated a dog that was a pause for cause animal and really good progress so far with that. I don't treat horses as much as I would like. And, to piggyback on I believe it was your last podcast, um, I'm not around horses very much at all. And my childhood was nothing about horses. So my shortcomings of learning the language and the jargon, the equestrian verbiage has set me back a lot. I know what to do when I'm on the animal. I've been trained and I just feel it. But when the owners are nearby, and they're trying to talk to me about this and that, I have no clue. I couldn't tell you the difference between a bridle or a bit or a crown or whatever. But I just know what to do. So, yeah, that's how they can find me. I'm in Holland, Michigan. I'm a study group leader, and I host those every 3 to 4 months, so about every quarter. And I don't charge for them. And we all just gather and just have a great time and just learn techniques or We answer the Aunt Sally questions that are typically wanted to be asked in seminars, but discouraged. I think the study groups, I think that's the place for the Aunt Sally questions.
Love it. Well, I just want to thank you again. Thank you so much for being open and honest, sharing your insights and this conversation with me. Thank you so much.
Thank you. This has been just a pleasure. Thank you so much.
Thanks for listening to another episode of Myofascial Health. I help myofascial release therapists create beautiful websites for their MFR practices, even if they aren't tech savvy. If you're just starting your MFR practice, or you're an experienced MFR practice owner, learn more about how I can help at www.myofascial.health/website.